I hate videos. Now, you may be wondering, if I hate videos, what the heck am I doing here? Happy Wednesday, everyone! Today is, of course, Wonder Women Wednesday, and I'm excited because I'm going to have a conversation with one of my amazing friends. Tracy Borreson is joining us today, and we're going to be talking about authenticity. So stay tuned, it's going to be an awesome conversation. If you and I have not met yet, hey, my name is Inge van Roy, and I am recognized as a community connection catalyst. What that means is I help you build community, especially if you are an entrepreneur or you are a business that needs to really create a cultural change and help your employees to know that they are there for the good of the entire company. So stay tuned. I want to say thank you. That was India Ree and with the song entitled Video. If you're listening on radio, I hope you enjoyed the song. And if you're not listening on radio, I'm sorry you missed out. But definitely go and check out the radio. And this is the website. So here is the website. It's africa.co.za. Check out the live stream and listen in as myself and Tracy, and then others on the platform as well, go live and share their thoughts and views with you. Of course, you are tuned into Wonder Women Wednesday, where we get to highlight ordinary women making an extraordinary difference. So, without further ado, I want to welcome my friend Tracy.
Hello,
Hello.
Inge. Hello, my
How are
friend.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's Wednesday, one of my favorites. So, Tracy, I know we need to be cognizant of the time. So, tell us, who is Tracy Borreson?
Who is Tracy Borreson? So, who is Tracy Borreson today? Is the question that you're really asking, because we're here to talk about authenticity, and I believe authenticity evolves over time. But
Absolutely.
it's really interesting to me because a lot of people will ask this question, and I actually also ask this question, and I find it interesting to see, like, what do people talk about? Do they talk about their families? Do they talk about their work? Like, what do people talk about? And for me, like, I am so many things. I'm many things. I am a mom. I am a branding advocate. I am an authenticity proponent. I am a tea drinker. I love the mountains. I could continue on and on, but I just want to remind everybody that we are all many things on any given day. And however
Yes.
you want to introduce yourself is a totally acceptable way to do that.
I love it. I love it. I actually, yesterday I taught a workshop on how to use LinkedIn to build community. And I actually said to them, because they were very curious about who I am. And I said, well, I'm an onion because there are so many layers to all of us, right?
Mhm.
Um, and really, truly, we are onions. There's so many things, just like you pointed out. So that's awesome.
Well, and I
What
would
else?
also just say on the onion analogy is that, so if you think about an onion, then it's almost like there's a layer covering up other layers. And
Yes.
so that is absolutely true. But also there are like multiple. So if you had like one layer of an onion and looked at like all of the different lines and textures and things like
Uh-huh.
that, that there's a lot that's happening on any given layer as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to note that as we grow and change as humans, that we are going to uncover more layers, but that doesn't mean that they're like things are discarded and then like I feel like we become more. We don't
Yes.
become less, which I think if you were like peeling an onion, you would think like I'm getting smaller. Um,
Yeah.
so I always think that there's so many analogies, and people can take analogies in a lot of different ways. So that was just coming up for me.
Yes. Always open to interpretation, right?
Mhm.
So, what are you drinking actually?
I am drinking orange pico tea in a giant Minnie Mouse mug. We're listening on the radio.
I drink to that.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers to you. I'm drinking rooibos tea actually.
Mm.
Have you ever had it?
I have.
Oh,
I won't call myself a tea aficionado because there's like people out there who know way more about tea than I do. But I probably have like at least 40 different kinds of tea in my house at any given
really?
time. Because, okay, so here's the thing about me from an authenticity perspective, I like variety. So I don't like to eat like one kind of food or drink one kind of tea or to like have one kind of type of friends. Like
Oh,
variety. So
wow.
I need variety in my tea as well.
Okay.
I drink it too. It's not like one of those like tea cupboards where you get like someone gifts you tea and then it goes to the back of the cupboard and no one ever drinks it ever. Like I drink all my tea in rotation. Keep my taste buds guessing.
Actually, you just reminded me of something. A few months ago, I visited someone's house and they asked me, "Oh, would you like something to drink?" And I'm very cognizant of not wanting to drink coffee.
Mm.
So I only drink it when I really need to have coffee. Like yesterday when I didn't have much sleep the night before, I had some coffee. But so she said, "Oh, I have some kind of teas, but would you like coffee?" And I was like, "No, I don't want coffee. What kind of tea do you have?" And she listed the teas, and she had ginger tea, and I was like, "Oh, I'll have ginger." But when I tasted it, it was probably
I
because
mean,
it's one of those long forgotten teas that not many people like.
well, I also think ginger in particular is like it's a very strong flavor. And so like
Yes,
I have lemon ginger tea because then they balance each other, I think. But like
yes.
I always find this at my sister's house because I think my sister's in like David's tea club and they just like get all
Oh,
of this and it's loose tea, right? So it's different than like bagged tea. And I'm like, one, there's always like weird flavors. And I'm like, all good to try it, but then you're also risking I'm going to make this whole cup of tea and then not want to drink this and have to make another cup of tea.
uh,
So,
yeah.
what are you going to do?
So, Tracy, actually, let's dive in. I want to ask you, how did authenticity become something that you were very interested in?
It's actually interesting because I feel like the farther I go along this authenticity journey, the more I see how it manifested my entire life, but I didn't know how to pay attention to that
Uh-huh.
information. And so something that always comes up for me is that I like see people. I see people the way in a different way than I think a lot of other people see people. Like I see people as individual people, and even if they're in a group, I see like the differences and what makes them
Yeah.
special and what makes them unique. And I've always been like from the time I was in school, I always wanted like everybody to be a friend and everybody to like see what they were awesome at. And I used to do so when I was 19, I coached my younger sister's baseball team, just like a house league, softball league. And I made, so everybody got just like t-shirts with numbers on them. And I was like, I'm going to make these into jerseys, right? So I'll get the like iron on letters and put people's names on the back of them.
Oh.
And then at the end of the year, I did awards, and everybody got an award based on like what they were specifically good at, because it's a team and we need everybody to do their part in order to do well as a team. And we came in at like 4th out of 6 teams. So it's not like we did great anyways. But like, this was something I was always called to do. And it was not something like, that wasn't a requirement of like, all of this was volunteer, right? These volunteer coaches. It's not a requirement. Your requirement is to show up and bring the equipment to the game. It's the requirement is to do these things. I used to, like, when I was in high school, I was on the yearbook committee, and I would get a list of all the students in every grade, and I would search the school for an ad hoc picture of every single person, because I felt like everybody deserved to be in the yearbook. Everybody goes to the school. It's not just like the cool people who deserve to be in this yearbook.
Right.
Which was then really funny because there was one person who wasn't in the grad video, and it was me. I was super mad about it. I was like, oh, okay, so other people don't care about this as much as I do. It's just like something that I have seen my whole entire life. And so it's really cool now to have recognize that and to be able to use that strategically, and like, what do I do for work, and how do I approach my parenting, and how do I approach my relationships, and how do I create networking events, right? All of these things are fed by my belief that every individual deserves to be seen. And so how can we then use that to create something different? So partially it's just me, I think. Not that I'm the only one who cares about authenticity in the world, but it's just like, it's been a part of me for, I think.
And I know that I'm going to reference this again, but in my workshop yesterday, I think it's serendipitous that we're having this conversation, because yesterday during my workshop, we were talking about, the difficulty that people actually have in showing up online, right? Because I was speaking specifically about really how to use LinkedIn to utilize LinkedIn to build community. One of the things that I encourage people always is to be real, right? And I told them
it's harder than it sounds.
It is.
Because we have a lot of practice not being real. And we have a lot of parts of different systems and structures that actually celebrate the less real parts of us. So when the less real parts of us get celebrated, then our brain says, okay, that's what people want to see, so let me show them more of that. And we actually forget how to be ourselves. And it's actually really interesting, though, because when you talk about that, Ingrid, I'm going to take it to like a real life example that happened to me in grade 7. Because in grade 7, I started a new school. Well, I mean, everybody in Canada is in a new school in grade 7, pretty much. You go into junior high, but I didn't go to school in the town I lived in before that. So I didn't have a group of friends coming in to the school year. And most 13-year-old girls, right? Like the Club Monaco sweatshirts were the trendy thing. So you get one and you look like everybody else, right? And I was just like, I never liked that. And I remember one day wearing to school my dad's old like tracksuit from the 70s, because I thought it was so cool. And I was like, no one else will have this, right? Like, I'm not going to look like everybody else. No one else will have this. And I went knowing I was probably going to get made fun of because I looked so different than what everybody else looked like. So I was prepared for that. But what happened was everybody was like, oh my God, where'd you get that tracksuit? It's so cool. And I was like, oh, right? Like, I got it from my dad's closet. You can't have one. But it was an interesting like stage setter for me, because it showed me that when I was brave enough to show up and do what I would do, that there were actually people who appreciated that. And so it's really interesting to look at how things can play out differently if you learn a lesson like that when you're 13 versus if you learn a lesson like that when you're 40. Or you haven't learned that lesson yet, not because someone hasn't tried to teach you it, but because you haven't experienced it. You have an experience where you get to show up just as yourself, and somebody, even if it was one other person, was like, I like that you are doing that, right?
Wow.
Good job, you. And I think this is something that makes it particularly difficult on social media. So there's not a lot of people who will stand up and say, good job, you, for posting
Yeah.
that. There will be a lot of people who consume that and actually think that. And the hard
Yes.
part about it is we don't know that because there's lots of lurkers and people who just like
Yes.
follow people. But there's not a lot of people who will be like, this really, I
Resonate.
needed to hear this today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you can do that and one person will say that to you, then you're like, okay, that was worth saying because it
Yes.
made a difference for one person. So one of the
Yes.
things I always think about too is I think it's highly underrated to like curate your audience. But if you get the right people in your audience and you post things, then all of a sudden the people, like I posted something earlier today and then Inger was like, oh, yes, thank you for being a change maker. And I was like, it's because I have people in my network who see that in
Yes.
me, right? So like it's
Yes.
easy for them to just like write a comment on a post because they've experienced it in me. They see that on an ongoing basis. They identify with that. We are kind of like a team going in a direction in that way. And
Yes.
so having that community of people, which is what you're all about, Inger, is like so important to being able to stand out and say what's important to you, because there will be people who love you behind it, even if they don't agree with you. And that's pretty amazing.
Yes, absolutely. I want to highlight a quote for you that I came across about authenticity, and it says, authenticity requires vulnerability, transparency, and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It's so interesting because I think a lot of times people think it's only about vulnerability and transparency. And generally, when we are feeling vulnerable, that's like the hardest time to show up in front of strangers, right? And then we got people telling us we need to be transparent. Okay, well, like, I'm feeling really terrible right now, and I'm supposed to tell the entire LinkedIn that I'm feeling really terrible right now. But until we layer in this layer of integrity, so my definition of authenticity is doing or saying what you would do or say when you would do or say it. And the integrity ties into like, what would you do, right? Would you say that? There's different levels of vulnerability. There's different levels of transparency. This doesn't mean that we have to show everything to everybody all the time. Like, my son went to school today and I didn't notice until he was at school that there's a big hole in the thumb of his glove and I could fix it, but I did like, that's not, that's transparent, but it's not particularly vulnerable. And like, why did I share that? That has no purpose, right?
Yeah.
So like any one of these things on their own doesn't stand alone, right? Like just being fully transparent will make people be like, oh, TMI, right? Like too much information. And then just being vulnerable can make other people feel like, okay, I'm not ready to like handle what's going on over there. So I'm gonna just give you space. But then you're not getting like that support, which is honestly, when you're trying to be vulnerable, something generally that you need and that is helpful is support. If you're just going for like integrity, which is, I think a lot of people who are doing just like business facts and things like that, like, I want to be known for this, I'm going to tell people the top 10 tips, email marketing over and over and over. And like, you could do that in a really integral way. Probably not going to build a relationship with somebody. So it's also look at like, how do you layer these things together? And some things it might feel really easy to be vulnerable about, and some things it might feel really difficult to be vulnerable about, and some things this has happened to me, like some things you'll say on podcasts that you've never even said to your husband. And you're like, that's okay, because it felt right to say at the time. But the whole point is in not holding any judgment about like, oh, I should tell my husband that. Should I? Does he care? I don't know, right? Like, that's a should story. I don't even know if it's true, right? So I can carry that around, or I could just be like, this story is like, all of my stories have an open door policy. There's no story that I won't tell, but I will only tell a story if I feel like it's relevant.
Yeah.
And who decides if it's relevant? I decide if it's
You
relevant.
do. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
That's the
So,
practice of authenticity, is deciding what's relevant and doing what you would do.
yeah. Yeah. Um, hmm. I have one question that's related to this, and I just want to say, we have 8 minutes before you need to go. So,
Thank you
what
for keeping me
does
on track.
that's good. So what does authenticity mean in the context of personal branding and community building, whether it's online or in person?
So here's my rule about branding. There's branding, and then there's personal branding. The difference between the two is making it personal. So if you want it to be a
Mm,
personal brand, it has to be about you. If you want
yeah,
to build a brand for a business, or I mean, quite honestly, I'm all about personal branding. So, like, I don't know why you wouldn't choose that, but there's people who build brands for different reasons. There's people who are not, they want to be behind the scenes. They want the brand not to be about them, right? They want it to be about a product or something like that. That's branding.
yeah,
That's not personal branding. That's not you having a brand. On the flip side of that, in essence, everybody has a personal brand. The personal brand is other people's experience of you. And so
yeah,
long as other people are having experience of you, then that is your personal brand. The interesting thing that happens is that everybody does that by default anyway.
mm,
People just do that. You build relationships in the way that you would build relationships, or you don't build relationships in the way you wouldn't build relationships. But that is you deciding authentically who you would build a relationship with.
yeah,
When we start to extrapolate this from like a business perspective or a community perspective, generally there's some kind of additional reason why you want to do that activity. So you're either trying to get clients online, you're trying to build a movement. There's lots of different reasons why people do. You're trying to sell books, right? Like there's lots of different
yeah,
reasons why people may want to do it. But then we go from this subconscious way of being, which is our natural personal brand, and we try to extrapolate it into this like business version of why we want to have a personal brand and a break. So instead of tapping into that subconscious, unconscious version of what we're doing to build relationships with people as a human since we were kids, we go to the internet and we Google search how to build a personal brand, and it tells us all these step-by-step things that we need to do, but none of them are, what were you like as a kid?
yeah,
What do you care about? What might you want to like build something on? Because it's not about, it would be like saying I live in Canada. It snowed today. Right?
oh,
It would be like someone being like, let's plant a palm tree on your front lawn. Because a palm tree is not going to grow here, right? No
no,
matter how hard I would wish a palm tree would grow in my front yard, a palm tree will not grow in my front yard. So when you implement a
mm,
personal branding strategy or community building strategy that is not compatible with who you are, it doesn't work. The best thing that can happen is you build a brand that
mm,
is separate from you, but it is not personal. And when we talk about community, I also think there's a lot of different levels of community, right? There's people who are trying to build a community for business
yes,
perspectives. There's people who are trying to build a community because they want to have a community of support people. There's people who try to merge those two things. There's, again, lots of different reasons
different
and whys
reasons.
behind
Yeah,
why people build community. But the important thing to look at is like, why am I doing this? And why to the perspective one level deeper of to make money. So if your
mm,
answer is ever to make money, why am I having a personal brand? To make money? No, this is not a
no,
good reason, right? And it probably won't actually lead to you making money. So unless
yeah,
you have a reason to have that, if you want to build community, great. My reason for building community is because I believe networking solves problems. The
yeah,
more people I know, the more problems I can solve. not me as a service provider, but I can make introductions that get solutions to problems executed because I'm not a fence sitter. I don't believe in like sitting on a fence with pokey fence posts up your butt, which is very uncomfortable when you could do something about it. I believe in doing things. So I build a network of people who do things, who can get you
Yes.
off the fence. And even if you're like, oh, I got off the fence on the wrong side. Okay, that's fine. Let's
Mm,
jump back over to the other side of the fence because we have people on the other side of the fence who can help as well. But that's why I network. That is based on how I believe in doing things. It is not based on someone else's version of what my personal brand should be. It's based on who I am. And so when you, I would say like the power in harnessing
mm.
authenticity from a personal branding perspective or from a community perspective is you get what you need out of
Yeah.
it instead of what someone else told you you should have.
Yeah. And really showing up as you, right?
Right.
Um, yeah. Yeah. Um, I know you need to go.
I know. We have
So,
time for one more question, maybe.
okay. Really? Yes. Okay, that's
Well,
fine.
yeah, I'll be Tracy quick.
Okay, how can individuals overcome the fear of being vulnerable and embrace their authentic selves, whether it's online or in person?
Okay, so there's actually vulnerability is a tricky one to watch, but
Yes.
we'll get there through a practice. So here's one of the practices that I always recommend. Look at what's in your room right now. So if you're on the radio, you might be in your car. Or what's in your car right now, or what you're thinking about, or what your playlist might look like, or what songs Inger plays that you really like and what songs you don't like. Look at these types of things. Look at the color of your water bottle. Look at the color of your headphones. Look at the kind of coffee mug you have. Look at the, I don't know, decor you have throughout your room. I have a whole bunch of nerd stuff and Lego. These are things I like, and I've chosen them because I like them. And we've all made those decisions in these seemingly innocuous places where they're not going to have any other impact on another human, right? So, what color headphones I choose is completely irrelevant to Inger or Claudia or Ileana, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You might like them. You might hate them. I don't care. I like them. Okay. It doesn't matter to me what you think because this is a me thing. These are mine. We all have made those decisions in specific places with specific people with specific decisions. And so when we can tap into that and just kind of remind ourselves that we actually have a practice of choosing things because we like them and doing things because we like them. I choose tea because I like it. I don't like coffee, right? Like we make
Yes.
those decisions every day. And
Yes, we
when we
do.
can tap into that and remind ourselves that we actually know how to make those decisions, it's one of the easiest ways to start to extrapolate this into situations where you might feel
Mm,
more vulnerable.
mm.
Places like social media, and even then, right? Like share a comment on someone's post where you feel like you know them, right? Like start with that, right? And build
Yes.
up to the place where you're like, I'm gonna stand here in my beingness and just say what I want because it's a practice. And authenticity is a skill. I talk about it as a skill all the time. It's not an innate character trait. It's not something you either have or you don't. It's a skill.
Yes.
Skills need practice to build them. And so,
Yes.
step one, realize that you've actually done that before. So, you're not starting from scratch. And two, start to practice it in a few more places that feel safe. And then start to
Yeah.
practice it in some spaces that don't.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. Where can people find you if they want to have a conversation?
Oh, people can find me on LinkedIn. Tracy Borreson. I'm the one with the pink headphones. You can't miss me.
That's right, you can't. Thank you, Tracy. Always
Thank you,
amazing
Inger.
having a conversation with you. Be blessed. Bye.
Bye.
Oh my goodness. If you are tuned in, I want to say thank you for being here, spending some time with us. Um, of course, I see that there are so many people watching live. And if you'd like to, please drop us a comment. Let me know How do you show up authentically? What is your special thing? I know that Claudia Wyatt was listening in, and for her, showing up authentically means that she comes with a lot of enthusiasm. You can see that in her profile picture on LinkedIn. She wears red and she owns that color. But also, when you interact with her, you'll see that enthusiasm. It is palpable. And then we have Ileana also tuned in. And Ileana, you show up authentically, and I'm so proud to have you in my circle. If you don't know Ileana, she's been on this show on Wonder Women Wednesday a few times actually, and she shows up as herself. She has she loves cartoons. So if you see her posts, you'll see that she uses a lot of cartoons in her posts, and she wears t-shirts with cartoons on them as well. So definitely, it is important to show up as you. Something that came out in the workshop that I taught yesterday was also really showing up online and owning who you are. A lot of people shy away from that because they're shy, or they don't want certain people to see who they are online. But I encourage you, show up as you, show up in your authentic self. You know why? Because at the end of the day, businesses, yes, they want to do business, but it's with people that they want to do business with. So people want to buy from people, not a business or a brand specifically, but they want to get to know you. And it's all really about that KLT factor that we speak about, right? Which is know, like, and trust. So I had Tracy Borreson on the phone, online here with me, and we were talking about showing up authentically. I want to talk about a little bit about how to cultivate your authenticity. So, number one would be self reflection. So, really think on who it is that you are and who it is that you want to portray yourself to be. And I will say that, showing up as one person online and another person in person is exhausting because nobody wants to do that. It's very tiring because you need to keep up with the pretense, right? Um, I'll tell you a quick story. I have a friend who is extremely full of energy. We actually call him the Energizer Bunny, and he had a show where he would come on and just you would be able to feel his energy. It was always high and he was always hyped. And then he had a one-on-one networking session with someone else, with someone who had been watching his shows periodically. And he came on and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And she looked at him and said, "Are you really the same way that you are on your shows?" And he's like, "Yes, of course." But that's the thing. A lot of the time, when you see somebody on social media, you think that they are portraying themselves to be a different person than they are in person. And yes, there are people that do that. However, as I read earlier, I'll say this again. So, as I read earlier, a quote that I was reading to Tracy and I shared with her, it goes a little something like this. It says, authenticity requires vulnerability, transparency, and integrity. So, when you do show up authentically as yourself, you need to be vulnerable. You need to be transparent, and you need to have integrity. That is so, so, so important. So, to cultivate authenticity, you need to have self reflection. Then, number two is honesty. Hmm. There are some people that have struggled with that, but I hope that's not you. So be honest with yourself and others. Number three is self acceptance. You need to accept who you are right now. Of course, we all want to be better than we were yesterday, and tomorrow we want to be better than we were today. And we always strive for better. But in that, we also need to accept who we are right now. Number four, we need to show up with vulnerability. So be vulnerable. And then number five is have boundaries. We're not asking you to let it all hang out. We're not asking you to hang all your dirty laundry out for everybody to see. But so what we're asking is yes, show up authentically, be vulnerable, be who you are, but have boundaries because we don't need all of that hanging out. And then number six is to really muster up your courage to show up authentically as you. Because honestly, showing up authentically definitely does require courage because you want to be able to connect with others, but you need the courage to be able to do that. And by embracing authenticity, guess what? It'll allow you to be able to connect and then also build community with others. So if you are watching live, I want to say, please come on over and join us on Africa Online Radio. This is the website that you can go to, and then you can click listen now. So go to africup.co.za. And remember, this show is all about highlighting ordinary women who are making an extraordinary difference. Thank you so much to those who are tuned in live. I'm going to close off this stream and take you on over to the other side. So come and join us on Africa Online Radio so that we can continue the conversation. Make it an amazing day. Come over to Africa. Let's go. If you are tuned in, I want to say stay